My mother sent me a bill for $350,000 on Mother's Day, labeled Cost of Raising a Failure. She announced it to the entire family of 50 relatives. So I replied with a single photo that made 49 of them block her immediately. The 50th person was my grandmother, and what she did was far worse. My name is Zora, and I am a 35-year-old forensic accountant living in Atlanta. If you have ever been the family scapegoat while watching a sibling get handed the world on a silver platter, hit that subscribe button. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from, because this revenge story is for you. The invitation to the Mother's Day brunch at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead was printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf lettering. That was my mother Bernice all over. She would spend $500 on invitations while claiming she could not afford to fix her leaking roof. As I walked into the private ballroom, the air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted lamb. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead, and the room was filled with the low hum of 50 relatives pretending to like each other. I smoothed down my dress and took a deep breath. I was a stranger in this room. Despite my success as a senior forensic accountant for one of the top firms in the city, my family still treated me like the awkward teenager who stuttered and preferred math books to beauty pageants. I found my seat at the far end of the long table near the kitchen doors. Of course, the prime seats were reserved for the royalty of the family. My mother sat at the head of the table wearing a hat so large it had its own zip code. She looked like the picture of a pious church matriarch, but I knew the viper hiding beneath the Sunday best. To her right sat my younger sister Tasha and her husband Hunter. Tasha was glowing in a designer dress that cost more than my first car, and Hunter was leaning back in his chair with that arrogant smirk that made me want to check my wallet. My mother stood up and tapped her spoon against her champagne flute. The room fell silent instantly. In our family, when Bernice Barnes stood up, you listened or you paid the price. She beamed at the crowd, her smile tight and practiced. Thank you all for coming to celebrate the joy of motherhood, she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. Being a mother is the hardest job in the world. It is a sacrifice, a giving of oneself until there is nothing left. She paused to wipe a non-existent tear from her eye, and a chorus of awe and amen rippled through the room. I took a sip of my mimosa, trying to wash down the bile rising in my throat. This was the performance. This was the show she put on for the church ladies and the extended family. The selfless saint. The martyr. But today is not about me, she continued, her eyes locking onto Tasha with a look of pure adoration. It is about rewarding the fruits of my labor. Tasha, darling, come here. Tasha bounced up from her chair, acting surprised, even though I knew she and Mom had rehearsed this. She stood next to Mom, basking in the attention. Mom handed her a thick, white envelope. Tasha tore it open and shrieked, "Oh my God! Mom, you didn't!" She pulled out 2 tickets and waved them in the air. Paris. First-class tickets to Paris for our anniversary. The room erupted in applause. Hunter stood up and kissed Tasha, performing the role of the doting husband perfectly. I clapped politely, my hands feeling heavy. I knew Mom didn't have the money for first-class tickets to Europe. I knew she had been complaining about bills for months, but appearances were everything to Bernice Barnes. Then the room went quiet again as Mom turned her gaze toward me. Her expression shifted. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard stare that I knew all too well. It was the look she gave me when I got a B+ instead of an A-. The look she gave me when I didn't make the cheerleading squad. And Zora, she said, her voice dropping an octave. I have something for you too. Come here. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to go up there. I wanted to disappear under the table. But the pressure of 50 pairs of eyes forced me to stand. I walked the length of the table, the sound of my heels echoing in the silence. When I reached her, she didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She handed me a red envelope. It wasn't the festive red of a holiday card. It was the jarring red of a final notice. A warning. Open it, Mom said. Her voice wasn't a request. It was a command. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a ticket. It wasn't a gift certificate. It was a formal invoice. At the top in bold black letters, it read, Invoice number 001. Below that, in all caps, were the words, Cost of raising a disappointment. My hands started to shake. I looked down the list. It was itemized. Orthodontist bills age 12, $5,000. Piano lessons age 8 to 14, $2,000. Private tutoring for math because you were slow, $1,500. Clothing and food, 18 years, $100,000. Emotional labor and distress priceless but estimated at $200,000. Interest accrued over 15 years, $41,500. Total amount due, $350,000. I stared at the number. The ink seemed to swim before my eyes. This had to be a joke. A cruel, sick joke. I looked up at my mother, expecting her to laugh, expecting her to say it was a prank. But her face was stone. You think this is funny? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. Do I look like I am laughing, Zora? She asked loud enough for the back of the room to hear. You have always been a drain on this family. Tasha brings us joy. Tasha brings us prestige. You bring us nothing but embarrassment. You are 35 years old, unmarried, no children, and you work some job looking at spreadsheets all day. You have never appreciated what I sacrificed to put food in your mouth. She gestured to the invoice in my hand. Tasha is an asset. You are a liability. I am simply calling in my debt. I want to recoup my bad investment so I can spend it on the child who actually deserves it. A gasp went through the room. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. My Aunt Sarah covered her mouth. My cousin Marcus looked away. But nobody said a word. Nobody stood up. This was the power of Bernice. She could commit murder in broad daylight, and people would be too afraid to testify. I looked at the invoice again. Piano lessons. I remembered those lessons. I remembered begging to quit because the teacher hit my knuckles with a ruler, but Mom forced me to go because it looked good for the church newsletter. Orthodontist bills. I remembered the braces she insisted on because she said my smile was crooked and ugly. You can't be serious, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. You are charging me for raising me. That is what parents do, Mom. You chose to have me. I chose to have a daughter who would make me proud, she spat back. Not a cold, ungrateful robot. You have that fancy job, don't you? You drive that nice car even though you park it blocks away so we won't see it. I know you have money, Zora, and I expect payment. She leaned in close, the smell of her expensive perfume making me nauseous. You have 30 days. I accept wire transfer or cashier's check. If you don't pay, I will sue you for elder abuse and emotional distress. I have already spoken to a lawyer. I looked past her to Hunter. The lawyer. He was sipping his champagne, watching me with eyes that were cold and calculating. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He was in on this. Of course he was. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I looked at Tasha. She was smirking, tracing the rim of her glass, looking at me with pity and disgust. Poor Zora, she mouthed. I looked at the 50 relatives. My family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They were looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was a criminal who had stolen something precious from their beloved matriarch. In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock turning. The part of me that was the daughter seeking approval died right there on the plush carpet of the Ritz-Carlton. The part of me that was the forensic accountant, the woman who hunted down fraud and destroyed liars with paper trails, woke up. I carefully folded the invoice and placed it back in the red envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a breakdown. Is that all I asked, my voice steady and cold? Mom looked momentarily confused by my lack of reaction. She expected tears. She expected begging. Yes, she said, narrowing her eyes. That is all. Unless you want to add a tip for my service. Hunter chuckled at that. A dry, humorless sound. I nodded slowly. I gripped the red envelope tightly in my hand. It felt heavy, not with paper but with ammunition. I turned to look at the room one last time, memorizing every face that remained silent. Memorizing every aunt who looked down at her plate, every uncle who pretended to check his watch. "Okay, Mom," I said. "You want to talk about finances? You want to talk about who owes what to whom? We can do that." I turned my back on her. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the ballroom, past the tables of shocked relatives, past the crystal chandeliers and the smell of roasted lamb. I walked straight out the front doors of the hotel and into the humid Atlanta air. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. I walked to the valet stand and handed him my ticket. As I waited for my car, I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the invoice, the red envelope, the itemized list of my childhood trauma with a price tag attached. She wanted a bill. She wanted a transactional relationship. She wanted to settle accounts. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app, not to transfer money but to check my balances. Then I opened my work email. I composed a new message to my private investigator contact. Subject: background check. Targets: Bernice Barnes, Tasha Barnes, Hunter Wilson. I climbed into my car and tossed the red envelope onto the passenger seat. "You made a mistake, Mom," I whispered to the empty car. "You forgot what I do for a living. You forgot that I don't just count money. I find where bodies are buried, and I was going to find every single skeleton in her closet and drag them out into the light." The 30-day countdown had begun. But she was the one who was going to pay. The silence that followed my declaration was heavy, thick enough to choke on. I turned on my heel, clutching the red envelope like it was evidence from a crime scene, which in my professional opinion it absolutely was. I had taken 2 steps toward the exit when a hand clamped down on my shoulder. It was heavy and titled and smelled faintly of expensive scotch and unearned confidence. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Hunter. My brother-in-law had a way of touching people that felt less like a connection and more like a claim of ownership. I stiffened, shrugging his hand off with a sharp roll of my shoulder before pivoting to face him. Hunter was standing to his full height, smoothing the lapels of his linen suit, a suit I knew cost more than my mother's mortgage payment. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile a shark might give a seal before dragging it under. "Now, Zora, let's not be hasty," Hunter said, his voice dropping into that smooth, practiced baritone he used when he was trying to charm a jury or intimidate a waitress. He stepped into my personal space, blocking my path to the door. The 50 relatives in the room leaned in, hungry for the drama. They were the audience, and Hunter was determined to be the star. I looked him dead in the eye. "Get out of my way, Hunter. This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does," he chuckled, shaking his head as if I were a petulant child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "When you marry into a family, you marry their burdens and their blessings. And right now, Zora, you are becoming a significant burden." He clasped his hands behind his back and began to pace a small semicircle around me, turning the hotel ballroom into his personal courtroom. He looked at the relatives, then back at me. I stood perfectly still, my face a mask of indifference, while my mind began cataloging everything. The slight fray on his cuff, the way his eyes darted to Tasha for approval, the sweat beading on his upper lip despite the air conditioning. "Zora, let's look at this logically," Hunter continued, raising a finger in the air. "I have reviewed the document Bernice gave you. Now, as a man of the law, I will concede that technically, strictly speaking, you are correct. There is no legal contract here, no signed promissory note. In a court of law, you could walk away and not pay a dime." He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. My mother let out a small wounded whimper from the head of the table, dabbing her dry eyes with a linen napkin. But Hunter said, his voice hardening, becoming sharper, "We are not in a court of law, Zora. We are in the court of family, the court of morality. And in that court, the statute of limitations never runs out on gratitude. You are standing here in your designer heels, holding a purse that probably cost $2,000, acting as if you created yourself out of thin air. You didn't. Bernice created you. She molded you. She sacrificed her prime years so you could sit in your ivory tower and look down on us." I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. The audacity was breathtaking. Hunter, a man whose law license was currently suspended for ethical violations, a fact I had uncovered weeks ago but kept to myself, was lecturing me on morality. "You talk about sacrifice," I said quietly, my voice cutting through his theatrical performance. "But I don't remember you being there when I was 16 working 2 jobs after school to pay for my own SAT prep courses because Mom said she needed the money for Tasha's modeling portfolio." Hunter waved his hand dismissively. "Details, Zora. You're missing the big picture. The picture is equity. You have it. The family needs it. It is that simple. We know about your living situation." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. "Don't look so surprised." Hunter sneered, leaning in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the first 3 tables to hear. "We know about the penthouse, Zora, the one downtown overlooking the park. We know you bought it cash. We know you are sitting on liquid assets that could change the trajectory of this entire family. And yet here you are, crying poverty over a measly $350,000. A murmur went through the room. The relatives began to whisper, "Penthouse cash." Their eyes shifted from sympathy to greed in a matter of seconds. I could see them doing the mental math, recalculating my worth, wondering why I hadn't bought them cars or paid off their debts. I haven't told anyone about my home. I used a shell company to buy it specifically to keep my name off public records. Hunter had been digging. This wasn't just a shakedown. It was an invasion of privacy. "Why are you so greedy?" Zoratasha's voice pierced the air, shrill and accusatory. I looked over at my sister. She had stood up, still clutching her tickets to Paris. She walked over to join her husband, standing beside him like the queen to his king. Her face was twisted in an expression of righteous indignation. "You have a penthouse?" she asked, her voice cracking with fake emotion. "You have a penthouse while Mom is struggling to keep the lights on, while we are forced to scrape by. Do you have any idea what stress does to a person?" "Zora?" Tasha gestured dramatically toward our mother. "Look at her. Just look at her. She is wasting away. She has lost so much weight because she stays up all night worrying about bills. She is frail, Zora. Frail. And you are hoarding money like some dragon sitting on a pile of gold while your own mother starves." I slowly turned my gaze to Bernice. Wasting away. My mother was currently finishing off a rack of lamb with a side of truffle mashed potatoes. Her plate was licked clean. She was wearing a gold necklace thick enough to anchor a boat, diamond stud earrings that caught the chandelier light, and a brand new dress that I recognized from the Neiman Marcus catalog as costing upwards of $800. Her skin was glowing from regular facials. She looked about as frail as a tank. But as I looked at her, Bernice slumped slightly in her chair, playing the part Tasha had assigned her. She let out a long, shuddering sigh and placed a hand over her heart, looking at me with wide, sorrowful eyes. "I just wanted the best for you, Zora," Mom croaked, her voice trembling. "I gave you everything. Is it so wrong to ask for a little help in my twilight years?" The manipulation was a masterclass. It was so brazen, so completely divorced from reality, that it was almost impressive. They had rewritten history, cast themselves as the victims, and painted me as the villain, all within the span of 10 minutes. And the worst part was the audience was buying it. My Aunt Sarah shook her head at me, disappointment etched in her features. Uncle Robert muttered something about honoring thy father and mother. They didn't see the gold. They didn't see the expensive food. They only saw the daughter refusing to pay the mother. Hunter stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest, satisfied with the turn of events. "So here is the deal, Zora," he said, his tone shifting from lecture to business. "We don't want to make this ugly. We really don't. You sign over the deed to the penthouse, or you liquidate enough assets to cover the invoice, plus a little extra for Tasha's emotional distress today. We call it even. You get to keep your place in the family. You get to come to Christmas. You get to be a Barnes." Or I asked, my voice flat. Or Hunter smiled, a predator showing his teeth. "We sue you. And not just for the money. We drag your name through the mud. We tell your fancy accounting firm how you abandoned your sick mother. We tell the church. We tell everyone. By the time we are done, no client in Atlanta will trust you with their piggy bank, let alone their corporate accounts. It clicked. Finally, the full picture clicked into place. This wasn't just about money. This was a robbery. A coordinated, premeditated extraction of wealth. They had done their homework. They knew I had assets. They knew I valued my reputation. And they assumed that, like the old Zora, the Zora who just wanted to be loved, I would pay up to make the pain go away. They thought I would write a check to buy their silence. They thought I would mortgage my future to secure my past. I looked at Hunter. I looked at Tasha. I looked at my mother, who was now watching me with a predatory gleam in her eyes, waiting for me to break. "You are right, Hunter," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I barely recognized it myself. This is about equity, and this is about debt. I took a step toward him, and for the first time he flinched. "I am glad you brought up the law," I whispered, leaning in so close I could see the pores on his nose. "Because I love the law. I live by the law. And I promise you, by the time I am finished with you, you are going to wish you had never learned to read a statute." I didn't wait for his response. I didn't look at Tasha. I turned and walked toward the double doors. Zora Bernice screamed after me, dropping the frail act instantly. "If you walk out that door, you are dead to us. Do you hear me, dead?" I pushed the doors open, the heavy wood yielding easily under my hand. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking a sharp, steady rhythm on the marble floor. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the sting of rejection that usually accompanied these family gatherings. Instead, I felt something else. A cold, hard clarity. They wanted a war. They wanted to talk about finances. They wanted to drag things into the light. As I stepped out into the valet circle, the humidity of the Atlanta afternoon hitting my face, I pulled out my phone. I saw the notification from the bank app. My accounts were secure. My assets were locked down. I opened my contact list and scrolled past family to a folder I rarely used for personal matters. It was labeled Asset Recovery and Fraud Investigation. "You want a bill, Mom?" I whispered to myself as the valet pulled up in my car. "I'll give you a bill. But you, Tasha, and Hunter aren't going to like the price." I got into the car, checked my mirrors, and drove away. The rear-view mirror showed the entrance of the Ritz-Carlton fading into the distance. It was the last time I would ever enter a room as their victim. Next time I would be the prosecutor. The drive from the Ritz-Carlton to my building in downtown Atlanta usually took 20 minutes, but I made it in 15. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I didn't play any music. I couldn't handle any noise. My mind was already too loud, replaying the scene in the ballroom over and over again. The way my mother looked at me with cold calculation. The way Hunter smirked like he had already won the lottery. The silence of 50 relatives who claimed to love me but watched me bleed out without offering a bandage. When I finally pulled into the private garage of my building, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour. I took the private elevator up to the penthouse. This was my sanctuary, my secret. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a view that cost me nearly $2 million in cash. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 10 years to afford this silence. I had hunted down embezzlers, exposed Ponzi schemes, and audited Fortune 500 companies to build this life. And nobody in my family knew it existed. To them, I was just Zora the bookkeeper who rented a small apartment in Midtown. I tossed my purse onto the marble kitchen island and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking. I told myself it was just adrenaline, but deep down I knew it was heartbreak. You can be the toughest woman in the boardroom, but when your own mother hands you an invoice for your existence, it breaks something inside you that doesn't heal easily. Then the vibration started. My phone was sitting on the counter, and it buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again. Within seconds it was vibrating so constantly that it sounded like an angry hornet trapped against the stone surface. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't look. But the forensic accountant in me needed to know the scope of the damage. I needed to assess the threat level. I picked up the phone, and the screen was flooded with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, text messages, missed calls. I opened Facebook first. My stomach dropped to the floor. There it was, posted just 12 minutes ago, a photo of the invoice. My mother had actually taken a picture of the paper she handed me, holding it up next to her tear-stained face. The caption was a novel of victimhood. It read, "Lord, give me strength. You sacrifice your body, your youth, and your finances to raise a child. You give them the best education, the best clothes, and a roof over their head. And when you ask for a little help in your old age, they turn their back on you." My daughter Zora threw this bill in my face today at brunch. She walked out on her family. She walked out on her mother. I am heartbroken. I feel like I raised a stranger. Please pray for my family as we navigate this betrayal. I just wanted to be appreciated. Is that too much to ask? I scrolled down to the comments. There were already hundreds of them. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the words of strangers and family friends, people I had known since I was a little girl. Mrs. Johnson from the choir wrote, "Oh, Bernice, I am so sorry. Some children just have hearts of stone. We are praying for you." A cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years commented, "Ungrateful. That is what she is. After everything you did for her. Shame on you, Zora." People I didn't even know were chiming in. A woman named Brenda wrote from Ohio saying, "If my daughter did this, I would disown her. You are a saint for putting up with it, Bernice." They were dissecting my character based on a lie. They were tearing me apart piece by piece, and my mother was liking every single comment. She was hearting the insults. She was replying to the prayers with folded hand emojis, fueling the fire she had started. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It wasn't just the lies, it was the public nature of the execution. She didn't just want money, she wanted to destroy me. She wanted to make sure that if I didn't pay, I would have no community left to turn to. She was scorching the earth. Then I opened the family group chat. The blessed lineage, 50 members. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my grandmother. The messages were scrolling by so fast I could barely read them. Aunt May was the first one I saw. Aunt May, who used to sneak me extra cookies when I was a kid. Aunt May, who told me I was smart. Her message read, "Zora, I am disappointed in you. Your mother called me crying. How could you ruin her special day like this? You need to apologize and make this right. We are a family, and we support each other. Fix this." Uncle Robert chimed in. "Money comes and goes, Zora, but you only have one mother. Don't be stingy. We all know you have a good job. Step up." Cousin Felicia, who had borrowed $500 from me last year and never paid it back, wrote, "It is crazy how money changes people. You think you are better than us now because you have a degree. Humble yourself." I stared at the screen, my eyes burning. Not one person asked for my side of the story. Not one person asked if the invoice was real or if the demands were reasonable. They just saw Bernice crying and assumed I was the villain. It was the narrative they had been fed my whole life. Tasha was the princess. Zora was the problem. Then a message popped up from Pastor Jenkins. He wasn't technically family, but he was in the group chat because he was the spiritual leader of our clan. Seeing his name made my breath hitch. Pastor Jenkins wrote, "Zora, my child. The Bible says, 'Honor your father and mother so that your days may be long upon the earth.' Greed is a sin. Hardness of heart is a sin. I am asking you to look inward and find the grace God gave you. Do not let money separate you from your blood. I will be praying for your selfish soul tonight." That broke me. They were using God against me. They were weaponizing my faith to shame me into submission. It was spiritual blackmail. I wanted to type back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell Aunt May that Mom was wearing a $1,000 dress while begging for money. I wanted to tell Pastor Jenkins that Hunter was a suspended lawyer who was manipulating everyone. I wanted to tell Felicia to pay me back my $500 before she talked about being humble. I typed out a furious paragraph. I poured all my hurt and anger into the text box. Then I stopped. I looked at the blinking cursor. If I sent this, what would happen? They would just say I was defensive. They would say I was angry. They would say I was proving them right. You cannot win an argument with irrational people using logic. You cannot win a fight with emotional terrorists by showing emotion. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to engage so they could keep the drama going, so they could keep feeling self-righteous. I deleted the text. I took a deep breath and set the phone down on the marble counter face down. The buzzing continued, a steady rhythm of notifications that sounded like a heartbeat going into cardiac arrest. I walked away from the kitchen. I walked down the hallway to the second bedroom, the one I had converted into my home office. This room was different from the rest of the penthouse. It didn't have plush furniture or decorative art. It was cold, clinical, and efficient. 3 large monitors sat on a wide desk. A secure server hummed in the corner. This was where I worked. This was where I hunted. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and rolled up to the desk. I touched the mouse and the screens flared to life, bathing the room in a cool blue glow. I wasn't Zora, the disappointed daughter, anymore. I wasn't the black sheep. I was Zora Barnes, senior forensic accountant. I was the woman who had brought down the CEO of a tech giant for hiding assets in the Cayman Islands. I was the woman who found the missing millions in the city pension fund. I logged into my secure workstation. I opened my proprietary software, the one that could link public records, bank data, and social media footprints into a coherent map of financial behavior. I cracked my knuckles. "Okay, Mom," I said to the empty room. "You want to play games? Let's play." The first question in any investigation is always the same. Why now? Why did Bernice need $350,000 specifically? Not 300, not 400, 350. And why did she need it within 30 days? Extortion usually happens for 2 reasons: greed or desperation. My mother was greedy, yes, but she was also calculated. This public outburst, this rushed invoice, it smelled like panic. It smelled like a deadline. I started typing. I didn't look at Facebook. I didn't look at the group chat. I went straight to the public records. I pulled up the deed to my mother's house. It was heavily mortgaged. She had refinanced it 3 times in the last 10 years. There was very little equity left. I pulled up Hunter's legal standing. Suspended. Confirmed. I pulled up Tasha's credit report. I had access to it because I had co-signed a car loan for her 5 years ago. A mistake. I never repeated, but it gave me a legal window into her history. Her score was in the low 500s, maxed out cards, collections. But none of that added up to $350,000 due in 30 days. That was a specific number, a liability, a debt that couldn't be ignored. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes and thinking. Where did my mother have financial responsibilities? She didn't work. She volunteered. She was the head of the social committee. She was the treasurer of the women's auxiliary at the church. My eyes snapped open. The treasurer, the women's auxiliary board at Greater Faith Tabernacle, handled the building fund, the charity drives, and the annual gala budget. It was a massive pot of money that flowed in from wealthy parishioners, and my mother had been the sole signatory on that account for 2 years. I typed in a new search query: Greater Faith Tabernacle Audit Schedule. It took me 3 minutes to find the church newsletter from last month. It was buried in a PDF on their clunky website. I scrolled down to the announcements section, and there it was. Upcoming Annual Financial Review. The Church Council is pleased to announce that an external audit of all ministry accounts will begin on June 15th to ensure transparency and stewardship of God's blessings. June 15th. I checked the calendar. Today was May 14th, exactly 30 days from now. A cold smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just found the blood trail. She didn't need the money for retirement. She didn't need it to recoup her investment in me. She needed it because the auditors were coming. My mother had her hand in the collection plate, and she had stolen so much that she needed her scapegoat daughter to bail her out before the handcuffs clicked. I looked at the phone, which was still buzzing on the desk. Let them text, let them post, let them pray for my soul. Because I was about to find out exactly where every single dime of God's money had gone. And when I did, I wasn't going to send a text message. I was going to send a subpoena. I turned back to the screens, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The victim was gone. The hunter was awake. And the prey was closer than they realized. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass of my corner office on the 32nd floor of the Sovereign Building in Buckhead. From up here, the cars looked like toys, and the people were invisible specks scuttling about their day. My office was a fortress of order. The mahogany desk was clear except for my ergonomic keyboard and 3 monitors displaying complex forensic data. The air smelled of expensive coffee and success. This was the world I had built. This was the world Zora Barnes owned. But even a fortress has a mail slot. At 9:15 exactly, my assistant Sarah knocked softly and entered. She held a thick envelope in her hand. Her face was pale. She looked nervous, which was unlike her. Sarah was the kind of woman who could stare down a tax auditor without blinking. "This just arrived by courier, Ms. Barnes," she said, placing the envelope on the edge of my desk as if it were a bomb. "It requires a signature, but the courier said it was already signed for by the front desk security. It is marked urgent and confidential." I looked at the return address. The font was familiar. It was a pretentious serif typeface that tried too hard to look established and respectable. Wilson and Associates Attorneys at Law. Hunter. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice level. "That will be all." She hesitated for a moment, sensing the tension radiating off the paper, but she nodded and closed the door. I stared at the envelope. It was heavy. Expensive linen paper. Hunter always did value style over substance. My hands were steady as I reached for my letter opener. I wasn't scared. I was insulted. He had dared to bring his circus into my sanctuary. He had crossed the line between family drama and professional warfare. I sliced the envelope open and pulled out a stack of documents. There were 10 pages. The first page was a cover letter written in aggressive legalese. Re-notice of intent to sue for constructive abandonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress and elder abuse. I laughed out loud. It was a dry, harsh sound in the quiet office. Elder abuse. My mother was 60 years old and did Pilates 3 times a week. She was healthier than most 30-year-olds. I flipped through the pages reading the accusations. They were works of fiction. Paragraph 1 stated that I, Zora Barnes, had entered into a verbal contract to support my mother, Bernice Barnes, in exchange for upbringing and education. Paragraph 3 claimed that my sudden withdrawal of emotional and financial support had caused Bernice severe psychological trauma, resulting in physical ailments including insomnia and heart palpitations. But it was paragraph 5 that made my blood run cold. It was the paragraph that made me stop laughing. It read, "Should Ms. Barnes fail to remit the sum of $350,000 within 30 days, Wilson and Associates will be forced to file a formal complaint with the Georgia State Board of Accountancy. We will allege that Ms. Barnes lacks the moral character required to hold a certified public accountant license, citing her financial negligence and predatory behavior toward vulnerable family members." I lowered the paper. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. This wasn't just a shakedown anymore. This was a kill shot. My CPA license was my life. It was the result of years of studying, sleepless nights, and grueling exams. It was the foundation of my credibility. In my line of work, reputation is everything. If a client thinks you are unethical, you are finished. Even a baseless complaint could trigger an investigation. It could freeze my career for months. It could cast a shadow that would never fully go away. Hunter knew this. He knew exactly where to aim the knife to cause the most damage. I felt a surge of rage so hot it felt like physical pain. I wanted to shred the letter. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to breathe. In for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. Think, Zora. Think like an investigator. Why would he threaten this? Why go nuclear so fast? Threatening a professional license is a high-risk move. If he filed a false complaint, he could be disbarred. Wait, he was already suspended. That was the key. He had nothing to lose. He was a desperate man playing with a loaded gun because he had already shot himself in the foot. He was bluffing. He had to be. But a bluff this dangerous meant they were terrified. They needed that money and they needed it now. I looked at the phone on my desk. Do not email him. Do not write anything down that can be used against you. Call him. I picked up my cell phone. I tapped the screen and opened my voice recording app. I set it to record and placed the phone face down on the desk next to the landline. Then I picked up the office receiver and dialed the number on the letterhead. It rang twice. Hunter Wilson speaking. His voice was smooth, arrogant, and completely unaware that he was walking into a trap. "You have a lot of nerve, Hunter," I said, cutting straight to the chase. "Ah, Zora," he said, and I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. "I see you got my love letter. I trust it found you in good health." I swiveled my chair around to look out at the city. "Cut the crap, Hunter. Elder abuse." "Really? Mom was doing the electric slide at the family reunion last year. If you file that complaint with the board, I will countersue you for defamation and harassment. So fast, your head will spin. And I will make sure your suspension becomes a permanent disbarment." There was a pause on the line, a brief crack in his composure. "You know about the suspension?" he asked, his voice losing a fraction of its polish. "I know everything, Hunter," I said, keeping my tone icy. "I know you haven't billed a client in 6 months. I know you are drowning in debt. And I know this letter is a desperate attempt to squeeze money out of me because you and Tasha are broke." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "We are not broke, Zora. We are simply experiencing a liquidity issue. And frankly, that is none of your business. What is your business is the fact that your mother is suffering. Suffering from what I snapped, from not having a new Mercedes, suffering from the consequences of trying to help ungrateful children." He shot back, his voice rising. "Look, Zora, let's stop pretending. I don't want to ruin your career. You are a good accountant. You make good money. Probably too much money for someone with no dependents." I gripped the phone tighter. "Go on. All we are asking is that you do the right thing," he said, his tone shifting to that patronizing lecture mode I hated. "Sell the penthouse. We know it is worth at least $2 million. You sell it, you pay Mom the $350 she is asking for, and you still walk away with $1.5 million. You can buy a nice condo in Midtown. You can still be rich. Everyone wins." I closed my eyes, imagining the satisfaction of punching him. "And if I say no?" "Then I file the complaint," he said flatly. "I will drag your name through every mud puddle in Atlanta. I will make sure every partner at your firm knows you let your mother starve while you lived in a palace. Image is everything, Zora. You know that. Can you really afford the scandal?" I let silence hang in the air for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I needed him to fill the void. I needed him to get sloppy. "Why? 350, Hunter?" I asked quietly, softening my voice to sound defeated. "Why that specific number? If it is just for lifestyle, why not ask for 50,000? Why is the number so precise?" He sighed, an impatient, exasperated sound. "Because that is the number, Zora. Jesus, why do you have to analyze everything? Because I don't have $350,000 in cash lying around? I lied. I need to know where it is going if I'm going to even consider liquidating assets." There was another pause. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the desperation warring with his arrogance. "Fine," he hissed. "You want to know. You want the truth." "Yes, Hunter. I want the truth." "Tasha needs to maintain her lifestyle," he said, the words rushing out. "She has credit cards, Zora. She has appearances to maintain. If people find out we are struggling, her brand deals will dry up. She is an influencer. Perception is her reality." "And Mom," I pressed. What about Mom? Mom. Hunter hesitated. Mom made a mistake, okay? She tried to help us. She moved some money around. Moved money around from where, Hunter? From the funds she manages, he snapped. Look, it is complicated. She borrowed it. It was a temporary loan to cover some overhead for my firm and to help Tasha with a down payment on the new Rover. She intended to put it back. I felt a cold thrill shoot down my spine. There it was, the admission. She borrowed from the church funds, didn't she? I asked, keeping my voice steady. From the women's auxiliary account. I didn't say that, he said quickly. I said she moved funds. It is a gray area, Zora. A slush fund. A black fund. Whatever you want to call it. It was money sitting there doing nothing, and the family needed it. So she embezzled money, I stated clearly. Don't use that word, he warned. It is not embezzlement if you intend to pay it back. That is why we need your help, Zora. The audit is coming up. If the money isn't in the account by the 15th, things are going to get messy. Messy, I repeated. You mean Mom goes to prison messy? She is not going to prison, he shouted, losing control completely. Because you are going to write that check, you are going to sell that apartment, and you are going to save this family. Because if you don't, I swear to God, Zora, I will burn your license. I will destroy your reputation. I will make sure you never work in this town again. Do you understand me? Help the family. Don't make me get rough. I stared at the phone. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. He had just handed me the smoking gun. He had admitted to the theft. He had admitted to the conspiracy. He had admitted to blackmail. I understand you perfectly, Hunter. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Good, he said, breathing hard. I will expect your call regarding the wire transfer by tomorrow. Don't test me, Zora. The line clicked dead. I slowly lowered the receiver back to the cradle. The office was silent again. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar in my ears. I reached for my cell phone. I stopped the recording. File saved. Duration 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I pressed play. Hunter's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. Mom made a mistake, okay. She moved some money around. It is not embezzlement if you intend to pay it back. I will burn your license. I sat back in my leather chair and exhaled a long, shaky breath. He thought he had terrified me. He thought he had cornered me. He thought the threat to my license would make me crumble like a cookie. He was wrong. He had just given me everything I needed. He had confirmed the source of the missing money. He had confirmed the motive. And he had documented his own intent to commit extortion. I looked at the threat letter again. The threat to my license. You made a mistake, Hunter, I whispered to the empty room. You came after the one thing I value more than money. You came after my professional integrity. I picked up the letter and fed it into the shredder by my desk. Not because I was hiding it, I had already scanned a digital copy, but because I needed to hear the sound of his threats being torn into meaningless strips of paper. The shredder whirred and gnashed its metal teeth. I turned back to my computer screens. I opened a new folder on my secure drive. I named it Operation Collection Plate. I dragged the audio file into the folder. Then I opened my email and began to type. Not to Hunter. Not to Mom. To the Georgia State Bar Association. Subject inquiry regarding unauthorized practice of law by a suspended attorney. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to dismantle him. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. The hunter had just become the hunted, and he didn't even know the season had opened. After the call with Hunter ended, I sat in the silence of my office for a long time. The shredder had stopped whirring, but the vibration of his threats still hung in the air. He thought he had paralyzed me with fear. He thought the prospect of losing my license would make me scramble to liquidate my assets. But he had forgotten the first rule of accounting, which is that every number tells a story, and every deficit leaves a scar. I turned back to my 3 monitors. The blue light washed over my face like war paint. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was an auditor. And I was about to conduct the most personal audit of my life. I needed access. Hunter had admitted that Mom managed the church funds, but admitting it on a recording and proving it with bank statements were two different things. I couldn't just subpoena the church records without a court order, and I couldn't get a court order without probable cause. I needed a window inside. Then I remembered. 3 years ago, when Mom was first appointed as the treasurer for the Women's Auxiliary at Greater Faith Tabernacle, she had called me in a panic. She didn't know how to set up the online banking portal. She didn't understand two-factor authentication. I had driven over to her house, sat at her kitchen table, and set everything up for her. I created the username. I created the password. Mom was a creature of habit and vanity. She never changed her passwords because she claimed she couldn't remember them, and the password I had helped her choose was the only thing she cared about in this world. Tasha Paris, 1994. It was my sister's name, the city Mom dreamed of visiting, and the year Tasha was born. It stung back then that her security question answer was about her golden child. But right now, that favoritism was my key to the kingdom. I opened a private browser window. I navigated to the bank portal used by the church. I typed in the username Bernice B_treasurer. I typed in the password. My finger hovered over the enter key. This was technically a gray area, but I argued with my conscience that as a member of the church who tithed 10% of my income, I had a right to know if my donations were being used to buy luxury cars for my brother-in-law. I pressed enter. The screen loaded. Access granted. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was in. The dashboard showed the main operating account for the Women's Auxiliary. This was the fund meant for charity drives, building maintenance, and youth outreach. It was funded by the hard-earned money of the congregation, mostly elderly women on fixed incomes who gave sacrificially because they believed in the mission. At first glance, the balance looked healthy. There was nearly $50,000 in the account. Most people would see that number and think everything was fine. But I don't look at balances. I look at the flow. I clicked on the transaction history tab. I filtered the results for the last 12 months. I exported the data into my forensic software, which immediately began to visualize the spending patterns. The graph that popped up on my left monitor was alarming. It showed a steady, rhythmic outflow of cash that didn't match the seasonal nature of church activities. Church spending usually spiked around Christmas and Easter. This spending was constant. It was hungry. I started drilling down into the line items. The first thing that caught my eye was a recurring charge to a vendor listed simply as Sanctuary Supplies Limited. The amounts were staggered to avoid detection. $4,000 here, $3,000 there. But they added up. I clicked on the invoice details for a charge from last month. The description read, altar candle maintenance and wick restoration. The amount was $5,000. I stared at the screen. I had grown up in that church. We used standard beeswax candles that cost maybe $10 a box. We didn't restore wicks. We threw the stubs away and bought new ones. $5,000 for candle maintenance was impossible unless we were burning gold bars. I pulled up the address for Sanctuary Supplies Limited. It was a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over. A classic shell vendor. I kept digging. My eyes scanned thousands of rows of data. My heart was pounding a slow, steady rhythm of anger. Then I found the event charges. 2 months ago, there was a charge for $20,000. The payee was the Serenity Springs Resort and Spa. The memo line in the church ledger read, Annual Homeless Outreach Planning Retreat. I scoffed out loud. I knew Serenity Springs. It was a 5-star luxury resort in the mountains. It cost $1,000 a night just to walk through the front door. Mom had claimed she was going on a spiritual retreat to pray for the city. She had posted photos of herself in a white robe holding a cucumber water. She hadn't been praying. She had been pampering herself on the widow's mite. $20,000 could have fed the homeless for a month. Instead, it fed my mother's ego for a weekend. But these were just the appetizers. I needed to find the main course. I needed to find the big money. The number Hunter was so desperate to replace. I sorted the transactions by largest amount. And there it was. A series of transfers starting 6 months ago. Transfer out $15,000. Transfer out $22,000. Transfer out $40,000. The frequency increased as the months went on. It was a hemorrhage. I looked at the recipient. It wasn't a vendor. It wasn't a utility company. It was a wire transfer to a business account. I clicked on the transfer details. The bank routing number was local. The beneficiary name was cut off on the main screen, so I had to download the full wire confirmation PDF. I opened the document. The PDF loaded slowly, revealing the digital paper trail of my family's corruption. Beneficiary name, Hunter and Associates, LLC. I froze. Hunter and Associates, LLC. Hunter didn't have associates. He barely had a practice. He was a solo attorney working out of a rented office share before he got suspended. This wasn't a law firm. This was a personal piggy bank disguised as a business. I started adding up the transfers to Hunter and Associates, LLC. 15,000 plus 22,000 plus 40,000. I kept adding. There were transfers for legal retainer fees, transfers for consulting services, transfers for liability assessment. Whatever label Mom could think of, she slapped it on the transaction to justify moving God's money into her son-in-law's pocket. My calculator tape ran long on the screen. The total for the last 6 months was staggering, $348,500. I sat back in my chair, my hands trembling with rage. The number was almost a perfect match. The invoice Bernice gave me for $350,000 wasn't random. It wasn't about the cost of raising me. It wasn't about piano lessons or orthodontist bills. It was a restitution payment. They had drained the church accounts dry. They had funneled nearly $350,000 into Hunter's failing life and Tasha's credit card bills. And now, with the audit looming on June 15th, they were panicked. If the auditors saw these transfers to a suspended lawyer's shell company, Mom would go to prison for embezzlement. Hunter would be disbarred permanently and likely face fraud charges. Tasha would lose her social standing. They needed a sucker to plug the hole, and I was the designated sucker. I looked at the screen at the evidence of their betrayal. It was so much worse than I thought. This wasn't just my mother being selfish. This was my mother stealing from her friends, from her community, from the very people she claimed to lead. She had stood in front of the congregation every Sunday, wearing her big hats and singing the hymns, all while siphoning their donations to pay for her daughter's designer handbags and her son-in-law's ego. And when the bill came due, she didn't look at her golden child who spent the money. She looked at me. She tried to guilt me into selling my home, my sanctuary, to cover their crimes. A notification popped up on my screen. It was an email from the bank alerting the user that a new device had accessed the account. Bernice would see the email soon. She would know someone was watching. I didn't care. I downloaded every single PDF. I exported every ledger. I saved the canceled checks that showed Mom's signature next to Hunter's endorsement. I had the smoking gun. I had the bullets. I had the entire arsenal. I closed the browser and cleared my cache. I looked at the photo of the invoice Mom had sent me. Cost of raising a failure. No, Mom, I whispered to the screen. This is the cost of raising a thief. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Tasha. Just sell the apartment, Zora. Stop being difficult. We are family. I stared at the message. The audacity was breathtaking. They truly believed they were entitled to my life to fix their mistakes. I opened a new folder on my drive and named it the Hunter and Associates file. I wasn't going to sell my apartment. I wasn't going to write a check. I was going to prepare a presentation. Because if they wanted to talk about where the money went, I was going to show them. I was going to show everyone. But not yet. If I revealed my hand now, they might run. They might try to destroy evidence. They might try to pin it on someone else. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. I needed to wait until they felt safe, until they thought they had won. I checked the calendar again. The deadline they gave me was 30 days, but the church audit was on June 15th. I smiled a cold, humorless smile. I wouldn't make them wait 30 days. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Tasha. I am thinking about it. Give me time to see what I can liquidate. It was a lie. A bait. I wanted them to think I was breaking. I wanted them to relax. Because while they were waiting for a check, I was going to be building a prison cell out of paper trails. I turned off my monitors, plunging the office into darkness. The city lights of Atlanta twinkled below, indifferent to the war that was about to start in the suburbs. The investigation was over. The prosecution was about to begin. Phipps Plaza in Buckhead is not just a shopping mall, it is a temple of commerce where the air conditioning is set to a crisp 68 degrees, and the floors are polished marble that reflects the insecurities of the people walking on them. I parked my car in the south deck and took the elevator up to the main level. I wasn't here to shop. I was here to witness a crime in progress. My forensic software had flagged a pending transaction on the Hunter and Associates business account just 20 minutes ago. The geolocation data was precise. The card was being used at the Gucci flagship store. I walked past the velvet ropes of the cinema and the display windows of Versace. I blended in perfectly with the afternoon crowd of socialites and tourists. I wore a simple black blazer and trousers, the uniform of the invisible professional. Nobody looked at me twice. They were too busy looking at themselves in the shop windows. I spotted her immediately. You couldn't miss Tasha. She was standing in the center of the Gucci store like she owned the building. She was wearing a white linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than my first car, and her hair was styled in long, expensive weaves that cascaded down her back. She was holding a handbag up to the light, turning it side to side, while a sales associate hovered nervously nearby. I didn't enter the store right away. I stood by the entrance pretending to look at a display of silk scarves. I watched her. I watched the way she moved. There was a frantic energy to her movements today. Usually Tasha was languid and slow-moving like a cat that had just eaten a bowl of cream. But today she was twitchy. She kept checking her phone. She kept looking at the door. She was spending money to calm her nerves. It was retail therapy funded by stolen alms. I watched as she nodded to the sales associate. The woman rushed behind the counter to retrieve a fresh box. Tasha pulled a credit card from her wallet. It was a heavy metal card, the kind that makes a satisfying clink when you drop it on the glass counter. I knew exactly which card that was. It was the corporate card issued to Hunter and Associates, LLC. The card that was paid off monthly by wire transfers from the Greater Faith Tabernacle Women's Auxiliary account. I waited until the transaction was processing. I waited until the receipt was printing. That was the moment of no return. Until she signed the slip, she could claim she was just looking. Once the ink hit the paper, it was theft. I walked into the store. The air smelled of expensive leather and subtle floral perfume. My heels made a sharp, deliberate sound on the tile, but Tasha didn't hear me. She was too focused on the bag. It was a beautiful bag. A structured tote in a dusty rose color with the signature bamboo handle. It retailed for roughly $4,000. That was $4,000 of roof repair money for the church sanctuary. That was $4,000 of food pantry budget. I walked right up to the counter and stood next to her. "That is a stunning color," I said, my voice low and pleasant. Tasha jumped. She actually jumped, dropping her pen. She spun around, her eyes wide with shock. When she saw it was me, the shock was instantly replaced by a sneer. "Zora. Good Lord. You creep up on people like a ghost. What are you doing here? I didn't think you shopped at places like this. Isn't the outlet mall more your speed?" The sales associate looked between us, sensing the tension. She slowly slid the shopping bag across the counter toward Tasha, trying to complete the handoff before war broke out. I ignored the insult. I looked at the bag, then I looked at the credit card sitting on the counter. "I am just running some errands," I said, keeping my face completely blank. "But I saw you through the window. That bag is gorgeous, Tasha. Really, it screams luxury. Tasha flipped her hair over her shoulder, regaining her composure. Well, thank you. I needed a pick-me-up. Dealing with family drama is exhausting. You know how it is. Or maybe you don't, since you are the cause of it. I stepped closer, entering her personal space. The sales associate took a step back. Tell me, Tasha. I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. Did you buy that with God's money? Tasha froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking like a mask on a corpse. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Excuse me, she stammered loudly, trying to regain the upper hand by making a scene. What kind of disgusting thing is that to say? You are sick, Zora. You are jealous and you are sick. I didn't blink. I looked down at the credit card on the counter. The name on it was clearly visible. Hunter Wilson. I am not the one buying a $4,000 purse with a card linked to a shell company, Tasha. I am not the one spending the widow's mite on bamboo handles and calfskin leather. Tasha grabbed the card off the counter and shoved it into her wallet. Her hands were shaking so bad she missed the slot twice. You are crazy, she hissed. This is Hunter's money. My husband works hard for this. He is a successful attorney. He provides for me. Just because you are single and bitter doesn't mean you can come in here and slander us. I laughed. It was a soft, dark sound. Successful attorney, I repeated. Tasha, do you really think I am stupid? Do you think I don't know? No, what, she snapped, grabbing the shopping bag. I leaned in until my lips were inches from her ear. I could smell her anxiety. It smelled like sweat and expensive foundation. I know Hunter was suspended by the Bar Association 6 months ago, Tasha. I know he hasn't legally represented a client since November. I know he hasn't earned a single dime of legitimate income in half a year. Tasha pulled back as if I had burned her. Her eyes were wild. Liar, she breathed. That is a lie. Is it? I asked, tilting my head. Then why does the state database list his status as inactive pending disciplinary review? Why does his business account show 0 deposits from clients and massive incoming wires from the church? She flinched at the word church. I kept going, relentless. Mama is taking money from the collection plate, isn't she? She is funneling it to Hunter's fake company to pay your bills. And you are standing here in Gucci spending money that was meant to fix the leaking roof over the altar. Tasha looked around the store. The sales associate was pretending to fold a scarf, but she was listening. A security guard near the door was watching us. Keep your voice down, Tasha hissed, her eyes filling with tears of panic. You don't know what you are talking about. Mom is borrowing it. It is a loan. We are going to pay it back. With what, Tasha? I asked. With Hunter's non-existent salary, with your non-existent modeling career. Or were you planning to pay it back with the money I get from selling my home? She didn't answer. The silence confirmed everything. That is the plan, isn't it? I said. You drain the church dry. Mom panics because the audit is coming, so you guilt-trip the failure daughter into selling her assets to cover your crimes. You wanted me to be your insurance policy. Tasha clutched the bag to her chest like a shield. You have so much money, Zora, she whispered viciously. You have that penthouse. You have stocks. Why do you care? We are family. You should want to help us. You should want to protect Mom. If she gets caught, it destroys everything. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. I saw the fear, but I didn't see any remorse. She wasn't sorry she was stealing. She was sorry she might get caught. She felt entitled to my money just as she felt entitled to the church's money. To her, the world was just a series of accounts to be drained to keep her comfortable. I am helping, I said coldly. I am helping the truth come out. I reached out and touched the handle of the Gucci bag she was clutching. Enjoy the bag, Tasha. I hope it matches the orange jumpsuit. Tasha slapped my hand away. She spun around and practically ran toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. She almost knocked over a display of sunglasses on her way out. I watched her go. I watched her pull her phone out of her purse before she even hit the mall concourse. She was dialing Bernice. She was calling headquarters. The sales associate cleared her throat behind me. "Is everything okay, miss?" she asked tentatively. I turned to her and smiled a genuine bright smile. "Everything is perfect," I said. "My sister just needed a reality check." It was on sale. I walked out of the store and stood on the balcony overlooking the atrium. I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to guess what was happening on the other end of Tasha's line. Tasha was screaming, Bernice was screaming, Hunter was probably throwing something. I had just walked into their safe space and lit a match. I had let them know that I wasn't just suspecting them, I was tracking them. I knew about the suspension, I knew about the money. They would be terrified now. And terrified people make mistakes. They would try to cover their tracks. They would try to move money around to hide the theft. They would try to destroy documents. And I would be watching every single keystroke. I opened my banking app again. I refreshed the view of the church's sub-accounts which I had accessed earlier. I saw a new login from an IP address in the suburbs. Bernice was online. She was checking the damage. Let the panic set in, Mom, I thought. I headed toward the elevator. My work at the mall was done. I had the visual confirmation. I had the confrontation. I had rattled the cage. Now I just had to wait for the rats to start running. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. By 5 o'clock they would try something desperate. Maybe they would come to my apartment. Maybe they would try to hack my accounts. Maybe they would try to get me fired. I was ready for all of it. I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in years. For my entire life I had walked on eggshells, trying not to upset Tasha, trying not to disappoint Mom. I had made myself small so they could feel big. Not anymore. Today I walked heavy, and the ground beneath them was starting to crack. The sun was beginning to set over Atlanta, casting long shadows across my living room floor when the intercom buzzed. It wasn't a polite rhythmic buzz. It was a long, angry, continuous drone that sounded like someone was trying to push the button through the wall. I didn't need to look at the security monitor to know who it was. The rats had finished running and now they were cornered. I took a sip of my tea, which was cold by now, and walked calmly to the wall panel. On the screen I saw the distorted fisheye view of my mother Bernice and Hunter. Bernice looked disheveled, her usually perfect hair flyaway and wild. Hunter was pacing behind her, loosening his tie like a man who was suffocating. I pressed the button to unlock the lobby door, and then I pressed the button for the elevator. I could have left them down there. I could have called concierge security to have them removed. But I needed this. I needed them here in my space. I needed them to say the quiet parts out loud one last time. I walked back to the kitchen island and checked the hidden camera I had installed in the smoke detector. The red light was taped over, but the lens was wide open, recording. When the heavy oak door to my penthouse rattled with their pounding, I waited 3 seconds before opening it. Bernice didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was okay. She shoved past me into the foyer, bringing a gust of humid air and aggressive perfume with her. Hunter followed close behind, kicking the door shut with his heel. "You little witch!" Bernice screamed, spinning around to face me. Her face was a mask of fury, the makeup settling into the deep lines of her frown. "You went to the mall. You stalked your sister. You humiliated her in front of a shopgirl. Have you lost your mind?" I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "I didn't humiliate her, Mom. I just asked a question about financing. It is what I do." "Don't you get smart with me," Bernice hissed, marching into the living room. She looked around the space with a sneer curling her lip as she took in the minimalist decor, the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the custom Italian leather sofa. "Look at this place," she spat, waving her hand dismissively. "Cold, empty, just like you, Zora. I bet you pay $3,000 a month for this rental just to feel important. Meanwhile, your family is suffering. Your sister is having panic attacks in her car because of you. She had no idea. She thought I was renting. She thought this was just another bill I paid. She couldn't conceive that I owned the entire building through a holding company. To Bernice, I was incapable of ownership. I was only capable of owing." Hunter stepped forward, trying to play the rational mediator, but his eyes were manic. "Okay, let's calm down," he said, holding up his hands. Zora, we are past the point of games. Tasha called us. She said you know about the accounts. She said you know about the transfers. I looked at him. I know you and Mom have stolen nearly $350,000 from the church, I said clearly, ensuring the microphone picked up every syllable. I know you are using donations to fund a lifestyle you can't afford, and I know you are terrified of the audit. Bernice let out a screech that sounded like a wounded animal. Stolen, she shrieked, advancing on me until I could feel her spit on my face. How dare you use that word? I didn't steal anything. I am the church Zora. I am the one who organizes the galas. I am the one who stays late to fold the programs. I built that women's auxiliary from nothing. That money belongs to me just as much as it belongs to the building fund. I stared at her, stunned by the absolute delusion. It is charity money, Mom, I said quietly. It belongs to the poor. It belongs to God. Don't you quote scripture to me, Bernice yelled, poking me hard in the chest with her manicured finger. God wants his children to prosper. God doesn't want me to lose my house. God doesn't want Tasha to be humiliated by debt collectors. I borrowed it, Zora. Borrowed. And I have every right to use the resources available to me to protect this family. She walked over to the window, looking out at the city she felt she owned. The only person stealing here is you, she said, turning back to me, her eyes cold and hard. You are stealing my peace. You are stealing the respect I deserve. You have the means to fix this. You have this apartment. You have savings. But you refuse. You sit there with your judgment and your holiness while I drown. It is not my debt, Mom, I said, refusing to back down. I didn't spend it. I didn't buy the cars. I didn't go to the spa. Bernice laughed. It was a terrifying sound devoid of any humor. You think that matters? She asked, tilting her head. You think the truth matters? She walked slowly toward me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Let me tell you what is going to happen, Zora. You are going to pay that invoice. You are going to write a check for $350,000 by tomorrow morning. And if I don't, I asked, bracing myself. Bernice smiled, a slow, predatory smile that chilled my blood. If you don't, she said softly, I am going to tell the church council that you stole the money. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at her, trying to process the level of evil required to conceive that thought. What I whispered. You heard me, Bernice said, her voice gaining strength. I am the treasurer, yes. But who set up the online banking, Zora? You did. Who has the passwords because she helped her poor tech illiterate mother? You do. Who is the big fancy accountant who knows how to move money around without leaving a trace? You are. She circled me like a shark. I will tell them that you manipulated me. I will tell them that you told me to sign those checks for investment purposes. I will cry, Zora. I will cry on the pulpit. I will tell them my own daughter betrayed me and used my trusting nature to embezzle funds for her high-rise apartment. I felt sick, physically sick. Hunter chimed in, his voice smooth and oily. Think about it, Zora, he said, stepping next to Bernice. Who are they going to believe? The beloved mother of the church who has served for 30 years, the woman who bakes pies for the sick and visits the elderly, or the cold, distant daughter who never comes to Sunday service and lives in a luxury penthouse alone? He chuckled, shaking his head. It is a narrative, Zora, and we control the narrative. We will paint you as the greedy corporate shark who took advantage of her elderly mother. We will say you tricked Bernice into signing transfers to my company, claiming it was a secure holding account. By the time we are done, you won't just lose your license. You will be facing prison time. They had rehearsed this. I could tell. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment threat. This was their contingency plan. If they couldn't bully me into paying, they would frame me for the crime. You would send your own daughter to jail, I asked, looking at my mother. You would let me go to prison for something you did just to save your reputation. Bernice didn't even blink. I would do whatever it takes to protect this family, she said. And right now you are not acting like family. You are acting like an enemy. Family sacrifices for each other, Zora. If you take the fall for this, you are doing your duty. But you don't have to go to jail. Just pay the money, cover the debt, and nobody has to know anything. It was the ultimate gaslighting. She was offering me a choice between financial ruin or total destruction, and calling it love. She was holding a gun to my head and telling me I was pulling the trigger. I looked at Hunter. He was checking his watch, as if this was just a business meeting that was running late. "You are a monster," I said to him, "both of you." Bernice's face twisted. She screamed a raw, primal sound of rage. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the entryway table, a vase I had bought in Italy, and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, shattering into 1,000 pieces, sending shards of glass skittering across the floor. "Don't you call me that!" she screamed. "After everything I did for you, I gave you life." She swept her arm across the console table, knocking over framed photos, my keys, and a stack of mail. "You ungrateful little brat," she yelled, kicking at the debris. "You think you are better than us? You think you are so clean? You are nothing without me, nothing." Hunter grabbed her arm, holding her back, not to protect me, but to stop her from damaging anything of value they might need to sell later. "Enough." Bernice Hunter said, his voice sharp. "She gets the point." He looked at me, straightening his jacket. "You have 24 hours, Zora," he said coldly. "The money needs to be in the Hunter and Associates account by 5 p.m. tomorrow. If it is not, we go to the pastor on Sunday morning. We will confess that we discovered your theft. We will show them the logs. We will cry, and they will believe us." I stood amidst the broken glass, looking at the woman who gave birth to me. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes full of hate. "Get out!" I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Get out of my house!" Bernice straightened her dress. She patted her hair back into place, instantly regaining her composure. "It is a nice apartment, Zora," she said, looking around one last time. "It is a shame you are going to lose it when legal fees start piling up." She walked to the door, stepping over the shattered remains of my vase without looking down. 24 hours, Hunter repeated, pointing a finger at me. "Don't be stupid, Zora. Save yourself." They walked out, leaving the door wide open. I stood there for a long time, listening to the elevator descend. I looked at the broken glass on the floor. I looked at the empty space where my peace used to be. They thought they had won. They thought the threat of framing me was the checkmate. They thought that because I was quiet, I was weak. But they had forgotten one thing. I walked over to the smoke detector. I reached up and pulled the tiny memory card from the hidden camera. They had just confessed to the crime. They had confessed to the cover-up, and they had explicitly detailed their plan to frame me for a felony. I held the memory card in my hand. It was smaller than a fingernail, but it carried the weight of a nuclear bomb. 24 hours, I whispered. I walked to my desk and sat down. I didn't start cleaning up. I wanted the glass on the floor. I wanted the reminder of their violence. I put the memory card into my computer. I watched the footage. The audio was crisp. The video was clear. Bernice saying, "I am the church." Hunter saying, "We will paint you as the greedy corporate shark." I wasn't going to wait 24 hours. I opened my email. I attached the video file. I attached the forensic accounting report. I attached the audio recording of Hunter from earlier. I looked at the recipient list I had prepared. It included the Georgia State Bar, the District Attorney's Office for Financial Crimes. And then I added one more email address. A private, encrypted address that belonged to the one person Bernice feared more than God. Grandma Hattie. My grandmother didn't use email often, but her personal assistant did. And Grandma Hattie didn't tolerate thieves, especially thieves who tried to frame her blood. I hovered my mouse over the send button. Bernice wanted to tell a story on Sunday. She wanted to control the narrative. I was about to publish the book. I pressed send. The digital clock on my computer monitor read 4:58 in the afternoon. The deadline Hunter had set was exactly 5 o'clock. My apartment was quiet, the kind of heavy, expectant silence that comes before a thunderstorm breaks. The only sound was the incessant, aggressive vibration of my phone against the marble countertop. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. The family group chat titled "The Blessed Lineage" was moving so fast the messages were a blur of blue and gray bubbles. It was a digital firing squad, and I was the target tied to the post. Bernice had clearly given the signal to attack. Her message was pinned at the top, posted 10 minutes ago. My own daughter has abandoned me in my hour of need. The stress is too much for my heart. If anything happens to me tonight, I want you all to know that Zora is responsible. She has chosen her money over her mother's life. Below that, the flying monkeys were doing their work. Aunt May wrote Zora, "This is ungodly. Your mother is a saint. How can you sleep at night in your fancy apartment knowing she is suffering?" "Send the money," Cousin Marcus chimed in. "You always thought you were better than us, Zora. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you can forget where you came from. Pay the bill." Even Uncle Robert, who usually never texted, had something to say. "Blood is thicker than water, Zora. Don't let the devil harden your heart. We are all waiting for you to do the right thing." Then came Hunter. "2 minutes, Zora. The paperwork is on my desk. The complaint to the Board of Accountancy is drafted. The lawsuit for elder abuse is ready to file. Don't test me." I watched the clock turn to 4:59. They were so sure of themselves. They were so confident that the pressure of 50 relatives screaming at me would force my hand. They thought I was sitting in my penthouse crying, shaking, debating whether to wire the funds to save my reputation. They didn't know I was sipping a glass of vintage Pinot Noir and waiting for the upload bar to reach 100%. I wasn't sending a wire transfer. I was sending a file. A 50-page PDF document titled "Independent Forensic Audit, Greater Faith Tabernacle Funds versus Hunter and Associates, LLC." I had spent the last 24 hours compiling it. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. It didn't just show numbers. It showed the story of a crime told through screenshots, receipts, and time-stamped geolocation data. The clock clicked to 5 o'clock. Hunter texted, "Time is up. Goodbye, Zora." I pressed send. The file was large, so it took a few agonizing seconds to process. The little circle spun round and round. For a moment, the chat continued its barrage of insults. Tasha wrote, "I hope you rot, Zora. You are disgusting." Then the circle stopped spinning. The file appeared in the chat, a gray box with a paperclip icon. Immediately after the file, I sent a series of photos I had prepared. I didn't want them to just read the numbers. I wanted them to see the betrayal. I typed my first caption. Exhibit A, the Orphan Fund. I posted a side-by-side image. On the left was a copy of the church flyer asking for donations for the St. Mary's Orphanage Christmas Drive. It showed a check from Aunt May for $500. On the right was a bank transaction from the church account transferring exactly $500 to Hunter and Associates. Below that was a credit card statement from Hunter and Associates showing a purchase at Gucci for $480. I added a photo of Tasha holding the Gucci bag from yesterday. I typed, "Aunt May, your donation for the orphans didn't buy toys." It bought Tasha a bamboo handle tote bag. She calls it her pick-me-up. I hit send. The chat froze. The bubbling stream of insults stopped instantly. I didn't stop. I kept typing. Exhibit B, the Sanctuary Roof Repair Fund. I posted the next set of images. On the left was the church bulletin pleading for $20,000 to fix the leak over the choir loft. It showed the total collected from the congregation, including a large donation from Uncle Robert. On the right was a wire transfer of $18,000 to Hunter and Associates labeled Legal Retainer. Below that, I posted a rental agreement from Elite Exotics Car Rental signed by Hunter Wilson. It was for a Porsche 911 convertible for a weekend trip to Miami. The cost was $3,000. The hotel bill for the Fontainebleau Miami Beach was $5,000. Bottle service at Live nightclub was $10,000. I typed Uncle Robert, the roof is still leaking because Hunter needed to drive a Porsche in South Beach. You didn't pay for shingles. You paid for bottle service and an ocean view suite. I hit send. Still silence. But I could see the read receipts. Everyone was reading. Bernice, Tasha, Hunter, Aunt May, Uncle Robert, Pastor Jenkins. All 50 of them were staring at their screens. I kept going. I was relentless. Exhibit C. The Homeless Outreach Program. I posted the invoice from Serenity Springs Resort and Spa. $20,000. The itemized bill showed massages, facials, champagne dinners, and a private yoga session. The guest name was Bernice Barnes. I typed, Pastor Jenkins, the homeless didn't get soup and blankets last month. My mother got a seaweed wrap and a bottle of Dom Perignon. She charged it to the ministry account as a spiritual retreat. I hit send. Then I sent the final blow. The video file from my apartment security camera, the one I had recorded yesterday. I typed, and for those of you who think I'm abandoning my mother here, is Bernice Barnes explaining her financial strategy yesterday in my living room. The thumbnail showed Bernice's twisted, angry face. I knew they were clicking play. I knew they were hearing her voice scream, I am the church Zora, I have a right to borrow it. I knew they were hearing Hunter say, we will paint you as the greedy corporate shark. I set my phone down on the counter and took a sip of wine. The silence in the group chat stretched for a full minute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that happens when a bomb goes off and the dust hasn't settled yet. Bernice usually replied instantly to defend herself. Tasha usually screamed. Hunter usually threatened. But they couldn't say a word. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't hearsay. It wasn't gossip. It was their own signatures, their own receipts, their own voices. Then the storm broke. It started with Aunt May, sweet, quiet Aunt May, who had just told me I was ungodly. Her message popped up in all caps. Bernice, is this true? Then Uncle Robert, that is my signature on the check. I gave that money for the roof. Bernice, you told me the contractor ran off with the money. You told me we needed to raise more. Are you telling me you spent my pension check on a Porsche for that useless son-in-law of yours? Cousin Marcus, who had just called me arrogant, wrote, Damn. That is the Porsche Hunter said he bought with his big case settlement. He told me he won $1 million lawsuit. He stole that from the church. The floodgates opened. The flying monkeys turned into a pack of wolves, and they turned on their handler. Mrs. Johnson, a deaconess added to the group by Bernice, wrote, I trusted you, Bernice. I gave you my Social Security check for the food drive. I ate cat food for a week so I could give $50 to the Lord, and you spent it on a spa day. Pastor Jenkins entered the chat. Bernice, Hunter, I am looking at these documents. Please tell me this is a fabrication. Please tell me Zora hacked the bank, because if these numbers are real, we are looking at a felony. Bernice finally typed. Her desperation leaked through the screen. It is a lie. Zora doctored the photos. She is a computer genius. She can fake anything. She is trying to frame me because she hates Tasha. Don't believe her. We are family. I didn't need to reply. I didn't need to say a word. I just sat back and watched as my family dismantled her defense for me. Uncle Robert wrote, I just called the bank, Bernice. I have a friend in the fraud department. He confirmed the wire transfer. It went to Hunter and Associates. You lied to us. You stole from us. Tasha tried to jump in. You guys are being so mean. Mom made a mistake. We were going to pay it back. Zora is the one with the millions. She could have fixed this. That was the wrong thing to say. Cousin Felicia wrote, Shut up, Tasha. You are wearing a $4,000 bag paid for by Aunt May's orphan money. You are disgusting. Take that bag back and give the money to the kids. The notifications were coming so fast, my phone was vibrating off the table. The anger in the chat was palpable. It wasn't just about money, it was about betrayal. These people had looked up to Bernice. They had envied Hunter. They had coddled Tasha. And now they realized they were the marks. They were the victims of a long con perpetrated by their own matriarch. Hunter left the group. The notification Hunter Wilson has left the conversation appeared on the screen. He was running. He knew the legal implications of what I had just shared. He wasn't sticking around to be yelled at by Uncle Robert. Tasha left the group. Bernice remained. She was probably too paralyzed to leave or too arrogant to believe it was really over. Aunt May tagged her. At Bernice, don't you dare leave this chat. You are going to explain to me why my donation is sitting in your daughter's closet. You are going to explain it to the Lord, and then you are going to explain it to the police. I watched the chaos unfold with a cold detachment. I should have felt sad. This was my family tearing itself apart. But I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. For 35 years I had carried the label of the disappointment. I had been the scapegoat. I had been the one who wasn't good enough because I didn't play their games. Now the lights were on and the cockroaches were scattering. My phone started ringing. It was Bernice. I declined the call. It rang again. Hunter. I declined the call. It rang again. Tasha. I declined the call. I wasn't speaking to them anymore. I had said everything I needed to say in that PDF, but I wasn't done yet. This was just the court of public opinion. I had won the family over, but that wouldn't put the money back in the church account. That wouldn't bring justice. I looked at the email I had sent earlier, the one to Grandma Hattie. Grandma didn't have a smartphone. She didn't do group chats. She lived in a sprawling estate 40 minutes away, disconnected from the digital noise, but plugged into the real power of this family. She would have received my report by now. Her assistant would have printed it out. Grandma would be putting on her reading glasses, sitting in her high-back chair by the fireplace. The group chat was just the fireworks. Grandma Hattie was the nuclear option. I saw a new message pop up in the chat. It wasn't from a family member. It was from Grandma Hattie's personal assistant using Grandma's account. It was a single line of text written in all caps. Bernice. Tasha. Hunter. You will present yourselves at the estate in 1 hour. Zora. You will come too. Bring your laptop. Do not be late. The chat went instantly silent again. Even Uncle Robert stopped typing. When the matriarch spoke, the world stopped. Bernice typed one word. Yes, ma'am. I smiled. The real trial was about to begin. I finished my wine and stood up. I went to my bedroom and changed out of my comfortable clothes. I put on my sharpest suit, a navy blue power suit that made me look like exactly what I was. A high-powered forensic accountant who had just caught the biggest fish of her career. I grabbed my laptop. I grabbed my keys. I took the elevator down to the garage. As I drove out of the city toward the estate, I watched the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was a bruised purple, just like the ego of my family was about to be. They wanted a family gathering. They wanted to discuss finances. They wanted to talk about what was owed. We were going to have that conversation. But this time, Bernice wouldn't be sitting at the head of the table. The drive to Grandma Hattie's estate was usually a peaceful journey through winding roads lined with ancient oak trees, but tonight the air felt electric. My phone sat in the passenger seat mounted on the dashboard, and it was glowing with the light of 1,000 fires burning down my family's reputation. I wasn't just driving toward a family meeting, I was driving through the wreckage of the bomb I had detonated 45 minutes ago. News travels fast in Atlanta, but it travels at the speed of light in the church community. The PDF I sent to the group chat hadn't stayed in the group chat. I knew it wouldn't. Aunt May was righteous, but she was also a gossip. Within 10 minutes of my post, I had received an alert that the document was being forwarded. First to the choir director, then to the head of the deacon board, then to Bishop Henderson himself. My forensic software, which was still running remotely on the server back at my office, pinged me with an update. The church bank account had just been frozen. The bishop hadn't waited for a meeting. He had seen the transfers to Hunter and Associates, seen the invoices for the spa and the Porsche, and he had panicked. He hit the kill switch. I tapped the screen of my phone to open Instagram. I didn't need to search for Tasha. She was live. Of course she was live. When the ship is sinking, a narcissist doesn't grab a life vest, she grabs a camera to document how unfair the water is. The audio filled my car. Tasha was sitting in her bedroom, the one in Mom's house that had been redecorated 3 times in 5 years on the church's dime. She was wearing the ring-light glow, like a halo, crying perfectly orchestrated tears that didn't ruin her mascara. "Guys, you have to believe me," she sobbed into the camera, looking at the scrolling comments. "My sister Zora is mentally unstable. She has always been jealous of me and Mom. She hacked our accounts. She photoshopped those bank statements. I don't even own a Gucci bag that was a gift from a fan." I watched the viewer count tick up. 5,000 people were watching. Half of them were from the church. Half were her followers who were about to get a reality show they didn't bargain for. "I am so scared right now," Tasha whimpered, wiping her dry nose. "She threatened us. She said she would ruin us if we didn't give her money. It is reverse extortion, guys. Please pray for my mom. She is downstairs having chest pains because of Zora's lies." Then it happened. Through the speakers of my car and through the screen of 5,000 smartphones came the sound of a heavy, authoritative pounding on the front door downstairs. Boom, boom, boom. Tasha jumped, her eyes darting to the bedroom door. "What was that?" she whispered. In the background, faintly but clearly, I heard the voice that every fraudster has nightmares about. "Police! Search warrant! Open the door!" Tasha scrambled up from her chair, knocking the ring light askew. The camera angle tilted, showing the ceiling fan and the corner of her expensive duvet cover. "Oh my God," she screamed. "Zora sent people to hurt us. Guys, call 911. She grabbed the phone and ran out of the room down the hallway toward the foyer. The live stream became a shaky blur of walls and stairs, but the audio was crystal clear. I heard the front door crash open. Mom must have refused to unlock it, or maybe they just didn't wait. I heard Bernice screaming, "You cannot come in here, do you know who I am? I am the treasurer of the Women's Auxiliary. Get out of my house." Then I heard Hunter. His voice was loud, booming, trying to project the authority he thought he possessed. "I am an attorney," he shouted. "I represent Mrs. Barnes. You are violating her Fourth Amendment rights. I demand to see the warrant immediately, or I will have your badges." Tasha reached the bottom of the stairs, turning the camera to face the entryway. The image stabilized. It showed 3 uniformed officers and 2 men in suits. The men in suits were from the Financial Crimes Division. I recognized one of them, Detective Miller. I had sent him the tip anonymously 3 weeks ago, and I had updated him with the audio file of Hunter's extortion threat exactly 1 hour ago. The livestream comments were going wild. "Wait, are those real cops? Did she say search warrant? This isn't a prank. Tasha, why are the police there?" Detective Miller stepped forward, calm and unimpressed by Hunter's posturing. "Hunter Wilson?" he asked, looking at a file in his hand. "That is me," Hunter said, puffing out his chest. "And I am telling you, as legal counsel for this household, that you are making a grave mistake." Detective Miller didn't even blink. He reached behind his back and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Mr. Wilson, you are under arrest for theft by deception, extortion, and the unauthorized practice of law." Hunter froze. The air went out of him instantly. What he stammered: "Unauthorized practice. I am a lawyer." "Actually, you are not," Miller said, his voice carrying clearly over the live stream. "Your license was suspended 6 months ago, Mr. Wilson. Representing yourself as an attorney while suspended is a felony in the state of Georgia. Using that false authority to extort money from a family member is another felony. And facilitating the transfer of embezzled nonprofit funds into your personal account is money laundering." The color drained from Hunter's face. He looked like a ghost. Tasha shrieked from the stairs, still holding the phone. "No, that is a lie. He is a lawyer. Tell him, Hunter. Tell him." Hunter didn't say anything. He couldn't. The officers moved in. They spun him around. The click of the handcuffs was audible, crisp, and final. Bernice threw herself at the officers, grabbing at Hunter's arm. "Don't touch him," she screamed. "He is a good man. This is a mistake. Zora did this. My daughter did this." One of the officers gently but firmly pushed Bernice back. "Ma'am, take a step back or you will be detained for obstruction," he warned. Tasha ran down the stairs, thrusting the phone into the officer's face. "I am live streaming this," she yelled. 5,000 people are watching you harass an innocent black family. You are going to be fired. Do you hear me?" Detective Miller looked directly into the camera lens. He looked at Tasha, then he looked at the phone. "Ms. Barnes," he said calmly, "we have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices suspected of being purchased with stolen funds or used to facilitate wire fraud. That includes the phone in your hand." "What?" Tasha gasped, clutching the phone tighter. "No, this is my phone." Miller nodded to a female officer. "Seize it," he said. The officer moved toward Tasha. Tasha screamed, trying to pull away, but it was over. The screen went chaotic for a second, spinning wildly as the phone was wrestled from her grip. Then the image went dark. Livestream ended. I let out a long breath in the quiet of my car. The silence that followed was heavy. The show was over. The reality had begun. I kept driving. I was only 5 minutes away from Grandma Hattie's estate now. My phone rang. It wasn't a notification. It was a call. The caller ID showed Mom. They hadn't taken her phone yet, or maybe she had a burner. Or maybe they were letting her make a call to arrange for a lawyer, since her current lawyer was in handcuffs in her foyer. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. Part of me wanted to drive on in silence. But the daughter in me, the part that had been hurt and rejected, and billed for her own existence, needed to hear it. I pressed answer and put it on speaker. "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice calm, steady, and devoid of sympathy. The sound that came through the speakers wasn't human. It was a guttural scream of pure, unadulterated rage. "You devil," she shrieked. "You demon. You killed us. You killed your own family." I kept my eyes on the road, turning onto the long gravel driveway of the estate. "I didn't kill anyone, Mom. I just forwarded an email." "They took Hunter." She sobbed, her voice breaking into hysterical gasps. "They took him in handcuffs, Zora. In front of the neighbors. Tasha is throwing up in the kitchen. They are taking the computers. They are taking the files. They said they are freezing the accounts." "That is what happens during a fraud investigation." "Mom," I said, "it is standard procedure. How could you?" she screamed. "How could you do this to your flesh and blood? Over money, over a stupid bill. We were just trying to survive. We were going to pay it back." "You weren't going to pay it back," I said, cutting her off. "You were going to make me pay it back. You were going to take my home. You were going to ruin my career. You were going to send me to jail, Mom. You stood in my living room yesterday and told me to my face that you would frame me." "That was just talk," she yelled. I was stressed. "I wouldn't have actually done it." "You would have," I said softly. "And that is why we are here." There was a silence on the line, broken only by the sound of police radios in the background at her house. "You are dead to me," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Do you hear me, Zora? You have no mother. Don't you ever come near me again. I hope you die alone with your money." I pulled up to the massive iron gates of Grandma Hattie's estate. The guard recognized my car and began to open them. "I am not alone, Mom," I said. "I am with Grandma Hattie, and she is waiting for you." Grandma Bernice gasped. "You told her." "I told everyone, Mom." She started to scream again, but I didn't listen. "I am hanging up now," I said. "You should probably save your battery. You are going to need to call a public defender. Hunter can't help you anymore. You be—" I pressed the red button, ending the call. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the crunch of gravel under my tires. I parked the car in front of the massive white-pillared mansion. The porch lights were on, casting a warm glow that felt like judgment. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but I looked strong. I looked like a woman who had just survived a war and walked out of the trenches without a scratch. I grabbed my laptop bag. The police had done their part. They had handled the legal consequences, but now I had to face the family consequences. I walked up the steps to the front door. It opened before I could knock. Grandma Hattie's butler, Mr. Henderson, stood there. He didn't smile, but he nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Barnes is in the library, Miss Zora," he said, holding the door open. "She has been expecting you." I stepped inside. The house smelled of lemon polish and old money. The dominoes had fallen. Bernice was exposed. Hunter was arrested. Tasha was broken. But the final tile hadn't dropped yet. The matriarch still had to speak. And I had a feeling that Grandma Hattie's judgment was going to be far more terrifying than any police raid. I walked down the long hallway toward the library, my heels clicking on the marble, echoing the sound of the gavel coming down. The library of the Barnes estate was a room designed to make you feel small. The ceiling stretched 20 feet high, lost in shadows that the dim brass lamps couldn't reach. The walls were lined with first editions and leather-bound legal texts that smelled of history and authority. In the center of the room, sitting on a high-backed red velvet chair that looked more like a throne than furniture, sat Grandma Hattie. She did not look like a woman who had just bailed her daughter out of police custody. She looked like a queen who was deciding whether to execute a traitor. Her silver hair was pulled back into a severe bun, so tight it pulled at the skin of her temples. Her hands rested on the silver head of her cane, and her eyes, usually warm with grandmotherly affection, were now 2 chips of black obsidian. I stood by the fireplace, my laptop bag at my feet, waiting. The silence in the room was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. Mr. Henderson, the butler, stood by the door, his face an impassive mask. Then we heard the car, the distinctive heavy purr of the vintage Rolls-Royce pulling up onto the gravel outside. It was the only car in Atlanta that commanded enough respect to park directly in front of the precinct and demand the release of a prisoner before processing was even complete. Grandma Hattie had made one call, and Bernice had been released into the custody of the family driver pending a formal arraignment. The front doors opened. I heard the sound of weeping. It wasn't the soft, sad weeping of someone who is sorry. It was the loud, hiccuping wails of someone who feels sorry for themselves. Bernice came into the library first. She looked like a woman who had been dismantled. Her expensive linen dress was wrinkled from being manhandled by the officers. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks. She was trembling. Tasha followed close behind her, looking like a terrified child. Tasha didn't have her phone. The police had seized it. Her hands were empty and fidgety, reaching for a device that wasn't there to comfort her. Bernice saw Grandma Hattie and threw herself forward, falling to her knees on the Persian rug. "Mama," she wailed, reaching out her hands. "Thank God you sent the car. It was a nightmare. They treated me like a criminal. They put me in a holding cell with drug addicts. You have to sue them, Mama. You have to call the mayor. You have to fix this." Grandma Hattie didn't move. She didn't offer a hand to help her daughter up. She didn't offer a word of comfort. She simply watched Bernice cry with a detached, cold curiosity, as if she were watching a bad actor perform a monologue. "Get up," Hattie said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms and built a dynasty. Bernice choked on a sob and scrambled to her feet, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She looked at me standing by the fireplace, and her face twisted into a snarl. "She did this," Mama," Bernice hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Zora did this. She hacked the accounts. She doctored the photos. She sent the police to my house. She had Hunter arrested. My poor Hunter. They took him away in cuffs, Mama. You have to tell them it is all a mistake. Tell them Zora is lying." Tasha nodded frantically, her eyes wide. "Yes, Grandma. Zora is jealous. She has always been jealous because Mom loves me more. She is trying to ruin us. Please, you have to cut her off. You have to disown her." I didn't say anything. I didn't defend myself. I knew the rules of this house. You speak when the matriarch addresses you, and not a second before. Grandma Hattie slowly turned her head. Her neck cracked slightly with the movement. She looked at Tasha, then she looked at Bernice. Finally, her gaze landed on me. Zora, she said. Yes, Grandma, I answered, standing straighter. I received your email, she said. Her tone was neutral, devoid of emotion. I read the report. I looked at the exhibits. I listened to the audio recording of Mr. Wilson threatening you. She tapped her cane once on the floor. A sharp, hollow sound. Are you sure? She asked. I looked her in the eye. I didn't blink. I am sure, Grandma. Are you certain about the numbers? Hattie pressed. Are you willing to stake your professional reputation, your license, and your place in this family on the accuracy of that audit? If I hire an outside firm tomorrow, will they find a single penny out of place from what you reported? I took a breath. I knew what she was asking. She was giving me one last chance to back down, one last chance to save my mother from total destruction. I am absolutely certain, I said, my voice steady. Every transfer is documented. Every invoice is verified. The money didn't go to charity. It went to Hunter and Associates. It went to Gucci. It went to Serenity Springs. It is all there in black and white. Grandma Hattie held my gaze for a long moment, searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she nodded once. A small, almost imperceptible movement. Then she turned back to Bernice. Bernice thought the nod meant something else. She thought it meant Grandma was looking for a loophole. See, Mama? Bernice pleaded, stepping closer. It is just numbers. Numbers can be manipulated. I borrowed the money. That is all. It was a loan between family. Since when is it a crime to help your children? I was going to put it back after the audit. I just needed time. Grandma Hattie lifted her hand, and the silence slammed back into the room. You have disgraced this family, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Bernice froze. What? She whispered. You have disgraced this name. Hattie repeated, her voice rising in volume, her eyes flashing with a sudden terrifying fire. Your father worked himself into an early grave to build this name. He scrubbed floors so you could go to college. I invested every dime we had so you could walk with your head high in this town. We built a legacy of honor, of service, of faith. Grandma Hattie leaned forward, gripping the arms of her velvet chair. And you stole from the church? She spat the words out like they tasted of poison. You stole from the widows. You stole from the orphans. You stole from God. And for what? For a purse. For a vacation. For a man who is not even a real lawyer but a con artist in a cheap suit. Mama, please, Bernice cried, shrinking back. Do not call me Mama, Hattie snapped. A mother protects her children. A mother sacrifices for her children. You did not sacrifice. You feasted. You feasted on the tithes of the poor, and when the bill came due, you tried to feed your own daughter to the wolves. Grandma Hattie pointed her cane at me. You tried to frame Zora, she said. I heard the recording, Bernice. I heard you say you would tell the council she did it. You were willing to let your own child go to prison to save your reputation. You were willing to let her rot in a cell so you could keep your position at the country club. That is not a mother, Hattie said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than a scream. That is a monster. Bernice fell back into a chair, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't fair. You don't understand the pressure. Everyone expects me to be perfect. Everyone expects us to be rich. I couldn't let them know we were struggling. I couldn't let Tasha lose her car. Tasha began to cry too, a high-pitched keening sound. Grandma, I didn't know. I thought Hunter had money. I am a victim too. Grandma Hattie laughed. It was a dry, harsh bark. A victim, she mocked. You are 30 years old, Tasha. You have eyes. You have a brain. You saw your husband sitting on the couch for 6 months without a client. You saw the money coming in from nowhere. You didn't ask questions because you liked the answers too much. You liked the shoes. You liked the trips. You are just as guilty as she is. Grandma Hattie sat back in her chair, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. She looked tired suddenly, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on her frail frame. "You think you are clever, Bernice," she said softly. "You think because I am old, I am blind. You think because I sit in this house, I don't know what happens in my own family. You think Zora is the only one who knows how to keep records?" Bernice looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What do you mean?" Grandma Hattie reached down beside her chair. Her hand, trembling slightly with age, grasped a thick, leather-bound folder. She lifted it onto her lap with a grunt of effort. It was heavy. It was old. The leather was worn at the edges and it was tied shut with a faded ribbon. It was thicker than my report. It was thicker than a Bible. She untied the ribbon slowly, her fingers working the knot with deliberate care. "Zora gave me the financial report," Hattie said, patting the folder. "She showed me what you did in the last 2 years. She showed me the $350,000. Grandma Hattie opened the folder. It was stuffed with papers, old yellowed receipts, handwritten ledgers, legal documents dating back decades. "But this," she said, looking at Bernice with a gaze that could strip paint from the walls. "This is my report. This is the ledger I have been keeping since the day you turned 18. She pulled out a sheet of paper and held it up. "This is the bail money I paid when you got arrested for shoplifting in college," Hattie said. $5,000. You told your father it was for tuition books. I paid it to keep his heart from breaking." She pulled out another paper. "This is the settlement I paid to the neighbor when you backed your car into their living room while you were drunk. $50,000. You told everyone it was a mechanical failure. I paid it to keep your face out of the mugshots." She pulled out a stack of papers thick and bound with a rubber band. "And this," she said, tossing the stack onto the coffee table where it landed with a heavy thud. "This is the money I have been secretly funneling into your accounts for 10 years because I knew you and that husband of yours couldn't manage a lemonade stand, let alone a household. I paid your mortgage, Bernice. I paid for Tasha's wedding. I paid for the cars. I did it quietly because I didn't want to shame you. I thought if I helped you, you would eventually stand on your own 2 feet." Grandma Hattie leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "But you didn't stand. You just leaned harder. And when I stopped the flow of money last year to teach you a lesson, you didn't get a job. You didn't cut back. You decided to steal from the Lord." Bernice stared at the pile of papers on the table. Her mouth hung open. She had spent her whole life thinking she was pulling the wool over the old woman's eyes. She didn't realize the wool was being knitted by Grandma Hattie herself. "Zora found $350,000, Hattie said, closing the folder. "But by my count, Bernice, you owe this family much more than that." Grandma Hattie looked at the folder. Then she looked at me. "Zora," she said. "Yes, Grandma. How much is the total value of the assets Bernice and Tasha currently hold in their names? The house, the cars, the jewelry?" I did the mental math quickly. I had run these numbers yesterday. "The house has very little equity, Grandma. Maybe 50,000 after the mortgages. The cars are leased. The jewelry and designer goods might fetch 200,000 on the resale market if we move fast." Grandma Hattie nodded. "It won't be enough," she said. "But it is a start." She turned back to Bernice. "You have 24 hours to pack your personal belongings," Hattie said. "Not the clothes I bought you, not the jewelry, just the essentials." Bernice gasped. "Pack? Where am I going?" "You are leaving," Hattie said simply. "I am seizing the house. I am seizing the contents. I am selling everything to pay back the church before the story hits the morning papers. I will not have my name dragged through the mud because of your greed." But Mama Bernice screamed, scrambling forward. "That is my house. You can't put me on the street." "It is not your house," Hattie said, her voice like ice. "It is in the trust. My trust. And as the trustee, I am evicting you." "Evicting me?" Tasha whispered. "What about me?" "You too," Hattie said, not even looking at her. "You and that criminal husband of yours can figure it out. Maybe you can sell that Gucci bag to pay for a motel room." Grandma Hattie picked up the thick leather folder and handed it to me. Zora, she said. I stepped forward and took the heavy file. It felt warm in my hands. It felt like passing the torch. You are the only one in this room who knows the value of $1 and the value of a name, Hattie said. From this moment on, you are the executor of the family trust. You handle the liquidation, you handle the repayment to the church, and you handle the eviction. She looked at Bernice, who was sobbing on the floor. If they give you any trouble, Zora Hattie said, call the police. You seem to be good at that. Grandma Hattie grabbed her cane and stood up. She was small, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She looked down at her daughter one last time. You sent Zora a bill for raising a failure, she said quietly. Well, Bernice, I am sending you a bill for raising a thief, and collection day is today. Grandma Hattie turned and walked out of the library, leaving Bernice and Tasha wailing in the wreckage of their lives. I stood there holding the heavy leather folder, the weight of the family legacy now resting squarely in my hands. I looked at my mother on the floor. I accept check or money order, I said. Then I turned and walked out the door. The leather folder in my hands felt heavy like a tombstone. I stood near the mahogany door of the library, watching the scene unfold with a sense of detached fascination. My mother Bernice was still on the floor, sobbing into the Persian rug, while Tasha huddled in the wingback chair looking like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together wrong. Grandma Hattie remained standing. She leaned on her cane, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on her daughter with a disappointment so profound it sucked the air out of the room. She wasn't done. I could feel it. The eviction notice was just the opening salvo. The real judgment was about to be delivered. Bernice looked up, her mascara running in black rivulets down her chin. Mama, please, she whispered, her voice hoarse. $5 million. That is impossible. You are making numbers up. I never spent that much. I have always been frugal. I have always kept up appearances for the family. Grandma Hattie laughed. It was a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Frugal, she repeated. You call 3 failed boutiques frugal. You call a destination wedding for Tasha in Italy frugal when the groom didn't even have a job. You call paying off your neighbors to keep quiet about your pill addiction frugal. Bernice flinched as if she had been slapped. I didn't think you knew about that, she gasped. I know everything, Hattie said, her voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. I paid the bills, Bernice. I paid the doctors. I paid the lawyers. I paid the silence. I kept a ledger of every single cent because I knew one day you would try to claim you were the victim. I knew one day you would try to bite the hand that fed you. Grandma Hattie took a step closer to her daughter. You sent Zora a bill, she said. You itemized her childhood. You charged her for braces. You charged her for piano lessons. You charged her for the food on her plate. You called it the cost of raising a failure. Hattie paused, letting the words hang in the air. Well, Bernice, I have itemized my costs too. The cost of raising a narcissist, the cost of protecting a thief, the cost of cleaning up the messes of a woman who never learned to hear the word no. Grandma Hattie raised 5 fingers. $5 million, she said clearly. That is the principal. I am not even charging you interest. That is the raw cost of your vanity over the last 40 years, and tonight I am calling in the debt. Tasha sat up straight, her eyes wide with panic. But Grandma, we don't have $5 million, she cried. We don't have anything. The accounts are frozen. Exactly, Hattie said, turning her cold gaze to her granddaughter. You are insolvent. You are bankrupt. You are a liability to this trust and to this family. And like any bad investment, I am liquidating you. Liquidating, Bernice stammered. What does that mean? It means I am selling everything, Hattie said. She walked over to the desk and picked up a phone. She didn't dial. The line was already open. Mr. Henderson, she said into the receiver. Execute the order. She hung up and turned back to us. The house in Buckhead is listed in the family trust, Hattie explained. You live there at my pleasure. As of 5 minutes ago, that pleasure has ceased. I have sold the property to a developer who plans to tear it down. He wants possession of the land immediately. Tear it down, Bernice shrieked. My home, my garden. You can't do that. It is not your home, Hattie snapped. It is an asset. And it is the only way to pay back the $350,000 you stole from the church before the bishop files criminal charges. I am using the proceeds of the sale to make restitution to the Lord. And what about us? Tasha asked, her voice trembling. Where do we go? Hattie looked at her with zero sympathy. I don't know, she said. Maybe you can go to Paris. Oh wait, you returned those tickets for cash, didn't you? Tasha buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. My movers are at the house right now, Hattie continued, checking her watch. They are packing up the personal items that belong to the trust, the furniture, the art, the silver. Anything that was purchased with family money stays with the family. You are leaving us with nothing. Bernice wailed. You are putting us on the street. I am leaving you with exactly what you earned, Hattie said, which is nothing. You have your clothes, you have your personal effects, and you have your freedom because I am paying off the church so you don't go to prison tonight. You should be thanking me. Bernice looked at her mother with pure hatred. I hate you, she hissed. You are an evil old woman. I hope you rot. Grandma Hattie didn't flinch. You have 24 hours to get your things out of the boxes on the curb, she said. After that, the city will haul them away. She turned to me. Zora, she said. I stepped forward, clutching the folder. Yes, Grandma. You are the trustee now? Hattie said. Her voice softened slightly, but her eyes remained steel. I am too old to babysit grown children. I am transferring the control of the entire Barnes estate to you effective immediately. The papers are in that folder. You handle the liquidation. You handle the repayment to the church. And you handle them. She gestured to Bernice and Tasha. If they need money for a motel, they ask you. If they need money for food, they ask you. You hold the purse strings now, Zora. Use your judgment. I looked at my mother. She was staring at me with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The daughter she had called a failure. The daughter she had billed for existing. The daughter she had tried to frame for a felony. I now owned her. I walked over to Bernice. I didn't kneel. I looked down at her. I will approve a disbursement for a motel for 3 nights, I said, my voice calm and professional. A budget motel. After that, you are on your own. I suggest you get a job, Mom. I hear the church is looking for a janitor since they fired the treasurer. Bernice screamed. It was a wordless sound of impotent rage. I turned to Grandma Hattie. Thank you, Grandma, I said. I will make sure the accounts are balanced. Go on, Hattie said, waving her hand. I am tired. I want to read my Bible in peace. Mr. Henderson, show them out. I walked out of the library. I didn't wait for Bernice and Tasha. I heard them scrambling behind me, arguing with Mr. Henderson, begging for more time, begging for a different answer. I walked out the front door of the estate and into the cool night air. The stars were shining brightly above the Georgia pines. I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. The heavy folder in my hand didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a shield. I got into my car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. I started the engine and drove down the long gravel driveway. As I turned onto the main road, I had to pass my mother's house. It was on the way back to the city. I slowed down as I approached. The scene was chaotic. 2 large moving trucks were parked on the lawn, crushing Bernice's prize-winning hydrangeas. Men in uniforms were hauling furniture out of the front door. I saw the velvet sofa sitting on the curb. I saw the dining room table where Bernice had sat like a queen for so many years now, upside down on the grass. And there, standing in the driveway amidst the wreckage of their vanity, were Bernice and Tasha. Bernice was screaming at a mover who was carrying a box of her shoes. Tasha was sitting on a suitcase holding her head in her hands. Hunter was gone, taken away in a squad car hours ago. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They looked like exactly what they were, people who had built a life on a foundation of lies and were surprised when the ground opened up and swallowed them whole. I could have stopped. I could have rolled down my window and gloated. I could have thrown a $20 bill at them and told them to buy a sandwich. But that would have required me to care. And I didn't care anymore. The invoice had been paid. The account was closed. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The engine purred. I didn't look back. I drove toward the city, toward the lights, toward my penthouse, toward my future. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. It was a notification from the bank. Trust, transfer complete. Administrator, access granted. I smiled. Happy Mother's Day. Mom, I whispered to the wind rushing past my window. I turned up the radio, letting the music fill the silence. The rearview mirror was empty now, just the dark road stretching out behind me, leaving the wreckage of the Barnes family in the dust. I kept my eyes forward on the road ahead. I had a lot of work to do. After all, I had a $5 million estate to manage, and this time every single penny was going to be accounted for. The most painful betrayals often come from those who share our blood, but Zora's journey reminds us that our worth is never defined by a family's inability to see it. We are not obligated to finance the people who abuse us, nor must we light ourselves on fire to keep them warm. True love is not transactional, and no is a complete sentence. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to close the account on toxic relationships and build a life where your peace is the currency. Justice isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming the dignity that was always yours. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your peace? Share your story in the comments below. If Zora's victory resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.